Then, for the past 33 years, I have looked in the mirror every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I am about to do today? And whenever the answer has been no for too many days in a row, I know I need to change something.
Imagine building a company from nothing, watching it become one of the fastest growing businesses in America, and then getting fired from your own creation. Sounds impossible, right? But that's exactly what happened to Steve Jobs. The man who co-founded Apple was pushed out by the very company he helped build. The story begins in 1976. Inside an ordinary garage in California. Steve Jobs and his friend Steve Wozniak weren't billionaires. They weren't famous. They were simply two young men who believed computers shouldn't belong only to large companies. They should belong in every home. With limited money and endless determination, they built the Apple I. It wasn't perfect, but it proved something important. Personal computers had a future. The Apple II changed everything. Sales exploded. Investors poured in. Apple transformed from a tiny startup into one of the fastest growing companies in American history. Steve Jobs became the face of a technological revolution. His ambition seemed limitless, but success brought new problems. As Apple grew, Jobs demanded perfection from everyone around him. He inspired people with bold ideas. Inside the company, disagreements became more frequent. Steve Jobs wanted to move faster than anyone else. Those two visions were on a collision course. In 1984, Apple introduced the Macintosh, a computer that changed the industry. Its famous Super Bowl commercial made headlines across America. Yet behind the scenes, the company was struggling with falling sales, internal disagreements, and growing pressure from investors. Then came the meeting that changed everything. In 1985, after a power struggle inside Apple, the board sided against Steve Jobs. At just 30 years old, the founder of Apple was effectively forced out of the company he had built. Imagine walking out of your own office knowing you no longer belonged there. For most people, that would have been the end. For Steve Jobs, it became a new beginning. Instead of disappearing, he started another company called Next. Financially, it wasn't a huge success, but it pushed computer technology forward. Around the same time, he bought a small animation studio called Pixar. Almost nobody imagined that little studio would create films like Toy Story and become one of the biggest names in animation. While Steve Jobs was building new companies, Apple was losing its direction. The company released product after product, but none captured the excitement that Apple once had. Many experts believed Apple might not survive. Then, in 1997, Apple made one of the most surprising decisions in business history. The company bought Next. That deal brought Steve Jobs back. The man they had forced out was suddenly leading Apple once again. This time, he returned with a clear vision. He simplified Apple's product lineup, focused on design, and refused to build products people didn't truly need. Then came one breakthrough after another. The iPod, the iTunes Store, the iPhone. It wasn't just another phone, it completely changed how billions of people communicate, work, and live. Apple didn't just recover, it became one of the most valuable companies in the world. Looking back, it's almost unbelievable. The company that once believed Steve Jobs was the problem eventually discovered he was one of its greatest strengths. This isn't just the story of Apple. It's a reminder that failure doesn't always mean you're finished. Sometimes the biggest setback becomes the foundation for the greatest comeback. Whether you admire him or criticize him, one fact remains impossible to ignore. Apple fired its own founder, and bringing him back became one of the greatest business decisions in history.